My Essential Birth Black Friday deals are live. Right now, you can grab the My Essential Birth course and get our exclusive birth affirmation cards download, belly mapping guide, and bonus meditation track, only available through this offer. And you can bundle and save by adding the postpartum course, plus get 2 more bonuses, which is our postpartum affirmation audio track and belly binding tutorial for you and your birth partner. Head to myessentialbirth.com and get started today.
If you're experiencing pelvic heaviness beyond that initial 8 weeks postpartum, this is definitely a sign that you're wanting to get some more higher touch, individualized support on board and getting a plan in place to help you understand and know how to rebuild your pelvic floor and core connection, how to make sure that you're feeling educated in what pelvic heaviness or prolapse symptoms might be, and then also feeling reassured too, because typically majority of prolapse symptoms can be conservatively managed with education, lifestyle modification, understanding toileting positions and bearing down and how to contract appropriately. And just with conservative exercises, that majority of people that are experiencing pelvic heaviness or prolapse symptoms don't need to get surgery or anything like that.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are 2 of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Pregnancy and Birth Made Easy podcast. I have with me here today Jessica. Dr. Jessica London is a doctor of physical therapy, pelvic floor therapist, pre- and postnatal coach, podcast of What About Mom, and founder and owner of Your Postpartum PT and Wellness at Your Postpartum PT. I'm going to give you all of the links to be able to access her and all that information in the show notes and within your emails, so don't worry about that. Jessica's mission is to meet mothers where they are to raise the standard of pelvic health education and postpartum recovery rehab. She enjoys partnering with like-minded healthcare professionals who work closely with women and moms to close the massive gap in pelvic health education and postpartum recovery and rehab. And that's why I'm so excited to have her here today. So stick with me. Your Postpartum PT and Wellness is a 100% online pelvic health rehab coaching company that primarily serves the pregnant and postpartum community, helping women reduce leakage, pain with intimacy, prolapse, and other childbearing or birth-related injuries while returning to strength training from the comfort of their home. I feel like that covers everything that we could possibly want. So I'm so excited to have you here today. With that, do you want to take a moment and add anything to it? Maybe just tell us a little bit about your family and your kids, and take a moment and say hi.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me on. Every chance I get to talk about pelvic floor and postpartum rehab, I'm definitely going to jump on it. So I'm excited to be here and share some support and value for your mamas. But yeah, I have 2 kiddos. I have a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. I've had a C-section and a VBAC, so I really intimately not only understand the physical side of, birth prep and recovery, but also the emotional, mental side of having 2 very different birth experiences and very different birth outcomes. But yeah, I'm located in, the Phoenix, Arizona area, and am loving, as everybody is entering winter right now and getting cold and putting their beanies on. I am stepping outside in my tank top, and it's really lovely over here.
That's awesome. I know we moved from Utah to Florida, and same. I'm like, anytime I want to feel better, I just go look at the weather in Utah, especially during the winter.
Definitely.
So, that's awesome. Okay. Well, your body goes through a lot of changes during pregnancy and postpartum. Will you talk a little bit about what moms can expect in that pelvic area?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, pelvic health doesn't even start. It starts before pregnancy, really. Oftentimes what we see is problems being exacerbated by pregnancy or the childbirth itself. So I think I like to say that just as like a precursor to a lot of times people think, oh, I'm only going to have pelvic floor issues once I have a child and I'm pregnant and I'm postpartum. But we have a lot of women that also struggle with leakage or prolapse or pain with intimacy, even prior to ever bearing a child or becoming pregnant. So that's what I'd love to say first, just to let anyone know, like, you're not alone. Some of these things have actually started before you have had a child, and then it was highlighted or exacerbated, if you will, during pregnancy or in postpartum. Is that interesting, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I can relate to that. I actually can totally relate to both sides of that. And so exacerbated was what happened for me. And like I didn't have leakage, for example, before. So that was like, oh, where did that come from? However, the like painful intercourse or some of these other issues that happened prior, it's like, yep, that definitely, it didn't go away. And it
Yeah,
existed prior.
absolutely.
So yeah, totally. Maybe you can just talk about for a moment. I think a lot of times moms experience kind of a heavy feeling after birth in their pelvic floor area. Will you talk about maybe like why and is that normal?
Yeah, definitely. So a heaviness feeling can allude to some symptoms of prolapse, right? And we have three pelvic organs. We have our bladder that's in the front of the pelvic bowl, our uterus, where our baby is obviously growing, and then we have our rectum. And these are our three pelvic organs that sit in the pelvic floor bowl, as we call them. In postpartum, whether you had a C-section or a vaginal birth, mom can experience what's called pelvic heaviness or symptoms related to prolapse. If it's very early on in the initial phases, that like the first couple weeks, then we're trying to be mindful of it and want to stay on track of it, but we don't want to freak out and just result to Google and go down the wormhole of the Google train, if you will. But we also see an increase in pelvic heaviness around that 4 to 8 week mark postpartum, just because of all of the hormone fluctuation that's actually happening. And this is where a lot of moms will start to notice those signs and symptoms of pelvic heaviness. So whenever I'm talking to a mom, I'm always asking her, how far along are you postpartum? What was your birth experience like? What was your birth injuries like, if you had any? What type of birth did you have? Because pelvic heaviness is so specific to each individual person, birth experience, and each person's body. And so I think just having parameters around that conversation can be so helpful to the individualized feedback that we give. But also just saying too, if you're experiencing pelvic heaviness beyond that initial like 8 weeks postpartum, this is definitely a sign that you're wanting to get some more higher touch individualized support on board, and getting a plan in place to help you understand and know how to rebuild your pelvic floor and core connection, how to make sure that you're feeling educated in what pelvic heaviness or prolapse symptoms might be, and then also feeling reassured too, because typically majority of prolapse symptoms can be conservatively managed with education, lifestyle modification, understanding like toileting positions and bearing down and how to contract appropriately. And just with conservative exercises, that majority of people that are experiencing pelvic heaviness or prolapse symptoms don't need to get surgery or anything like that.
Yeah. So I would assume that this is stuff that you cover within that program. And so I guess my question would be, at what point do you recommend that women dive into that? You'd mentioned, if after 8 weeks you're still feeling this or whatever, but I know that like preventatively, it's probably even better before that, right?
100,000,000%. Yes. I think all women actually should be starting in pregnancy. And the clients that we work with, specifically one on one, if we can get them in pregnancy, especially around that second or early third trimester standpoint, we're able to teach them all of those different things. We're able to teach them how to connect to their pelvic floor and to core. We're able to teach them how to contract, but also how to relax and lengthen. And so we're really working with them in pregnancy and then starting with them in their post-operative or rehab after they have their vaginal or C-section birth in that day zero, day one, right? They just had their baby. What are 5 to 10 minutes of things they can do in or around their bed in those first early weeks to help them start forming that neuromuscular connection, to help rebuild the muscular wall and the pelvic floor as well. So absolutely, if you're like really a preventative minded thinking person, I would start in pregnancy, start getting some support to be able to understand what the heck the pelvic floor is, its role in birth and postpartum, And then you'll be able to already be integrated, especially if you work with us, of course, integrated to just blend right into that 0 to 6 week mark. So you already have support on board and you're not scrambling to find a pelvic floor therapist or to find pelvic floor rehab coaching in that postpartum period when things are already so busy and so crazy and schedules are changing and feeding schedules and everything like that. It just feels like one more thing to do on your to-do list. So I find that you get the best outcomes and the best support if you start in pregnancy, but also just to validate it's never too early and it's never too late. And then whenever you start is divine timing too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think it's really helpful to know that you have access to things prior to being postpartum. And I'm with you 100% because as soon as that baby's here, it's like, so, and it's so easy for us as moms to like put off our needs too, because there's so many of baby's needs that need to be met. So these kinds of things can end up, a year later and we're still having issues and I should probably do something about that. So and preventatively too, even when we're talking about like the labor process and pushing and like how to activate certain areas to even be better to our bodies during that process, I think is huge. And so it's something like this I think would be really great for that as well. Will you talk about pelvic prolapse just for a moment? Kind of like symptoms, when to worry, and what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just normalizing the process a bit that the body goes through. So typically the statistics are pretty high that a woman will have some form of prolapse post birth, right? So it's like 70 to 80% up there that they'll have some form of prolapse. Now this can be grade 1, and typically grade 1 prolapse, whether it is the bladder, the uterus, or the rectum, we're not really noticing symptoms of feeling of the heaviness. So someone can have a grade 1 prolapse and actually have no idea or no symptoms or no feeling of pelvic heaviness at all whatsoever. And so this is what we talk about the precursor, right? You can have grade 1 prolapse before getting pregnant, or it can start developing in pregnancy and you don't really know. So after birth, it can feel all of a sudden like it came on all of a sudden so quick. And grade 2 is actually where we start feeling that heaviness, right? We start feeling those symptoms. And when I talk about the grades, that just means like the descent of those pelvic organs descending into the vaginal or pressing into the vaginal canals, just to be clear there. So when we're starting to feel those symptoms, we're probably around a grade 2, right? We're starting to notice a little bit of bulging, or like we have like a stuck tampon type feeling, or maybe you feel like you're sitting on a little ball. Maybe you only notice it around your menstrual cycle, whenever that comes into play around postpartum, right? Or, before a bowel movement, maybe you notice as you're about to empty your bladder or bowel system, maybe that's when you start to notice like a feeling of fullness or a descending when you're sitting on the toilet. These are all common symptoms of, pelvic heaviness or prolapse specifically. And again, it is very common, but should not be normalized. And there are definitely things that you can do proactively to help support that vaginal canal again and the pelvic floor to help those pelvic organs be able to be more supported again.
What do you mind sharing maybe even just one thing that women could do if they start experiencing this, or if they feel that fullness? Anything that they can like be aware of and utilize and use right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to give like maybe a practical strategy and exercise, but also a mindset strategy too, because oftentimes with prolapse, it can be very much like a head game, right? With increased stress, with increased nervous system upregulation, as we call it, this can exacerbate the symptoms that you're experiencing with prolapse. So don't freak out. That would be like my very first thing is like, as soon as somebody feels prolapse for the first time, they're like, oh my God, everything's falling out. And they go to Google and you need to get surgery. And they're just like freaking out and they feel so much shame and embarrassment. And like, I'm not 70 years old. This shouldn't be happening to me, right? So I think the number one thing you can do if you start to feel with that, just keep your nervous system and your body calm, try not to freak out, and get a resource one-on-one support on your team as quickly as possible so that they can educate you specifically, right? Other tactical things that you can do if you're starting to feel this is being mindful of not bearing down, right? So when we're on the toilet, not pushing hard or straining for a bowel movement. So we often can see constipation and prolapse or pelvic heaviness kind of coexist together because there's a lot of strain and stress being put on the pelvic floor. So being mindful not to bear down on the pelvic floor during toileting, and also bearing down too can happen picking up kids, picking up groceries. So just being really mindful of not putting a ton of extra pressure on that, region. Other exercises or things that you can do just to start integrating is to become pelvic floor aware, right? One of the first things that we teach our clients in our mind body connection phase is getting the nervous system, the brain to body connection registered again. So it really is about getting connected with your breath and understanding how the pelvic floor is connected to breath. And that when we take that breath in, the pelvic floor should naturally lengthen and relax as the internal pressure system is kind of going down. And then on the exhale, we can practice like a gentle contraction and lift. One thing to be aware of is to not over Kegel or over tense though, because with prolapse symptoms, moms can tend to feel like, oh my gosh, something's falling out down there. So we like end up doing hundreds of Kegels, or we start tensing our body down there, trying to squeeze it and hold it all in. And that can actually create the symptoms of prolapse to feel worse than the prolapse actually is.
That's perfect actually, because that was going to be my next question is that, and I'm hoping this is becoming more of like an old wives' tale, that's being brought in, but Kegels are still something that are mentioned, particularly from providers when not when they're going to pelvic PT providers, but just even they're like OBs and stuff that like, oh, try some Kegels. So will you take a moment and kind of talk about Kegels and should moms be doing them during pregnancy? Should they be doing them postpartum? Is there any benefit at all?
Yeah, I love this question so much. And I think too, I'm the type of provider and support person to say Kegels really are not the enemy, right? I think it's like a starting point, right? So Kegels is like a pelvic floor contraction. Majority of people are doing them incorrectly, right? So there's a huge educational component there that's needed. But typically, if we're just prescribing Kegels, we end up having moms do hundreds of Kegels, pelvic floor contractions, which can often create more pelvic tension and more pelvic guarding, which especially going into birth can be challenging because we need the pelvic floor to release, open, and lengthen for a vaginal birth to happen. And if we're doing too many Kegels in pregnancy, then we can have too much tension, too much guarding in that pelvic floor region when we really need to teach mom how to connect to her pelvic floor to lengthen, to release, instead of tighten and shorten. So I really don't think Kegels are the enemy in my perspective. I think the enemy actually is the lack of education, the lack of doing pelvic floor contractions correctly, and the lack of individualization of who should be doing Kegels and who should not be doing Kegels.
Okay. Yeah. That's actually really helpful because I know it's like that one thing that like everybody comes back to is do the Kegels. And I love that you talked about the fact that we might even be doing them wrong, which can cause more of a problem. And it's so interesting. The first time I went to pelvic floor therapy and, you guys do all kinds of testing, but you put little like wires there and you want to see tension and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, I live like tense here, like all day, every day. And it's no wonder I have all these issues. And so Kegels were something that were recommended to me early on in pregnancy. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Not through pelvic floor therapy, but I thought, oh, how interesting, that like here I could very well have been doing them wrong all these years and created more tension. So I think that's totally valid and important. And I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with kind of what you mentioned previously, like having pain with intimacy prior to pregnancy. It's one of the telltale signs of living in a chronic or tense pelvic floor state, right? Where that pelvic floor is already guarded, it's already tense, it's already living in a shortened position. That is someone we would definitely not prescribe Kegels to because we're already dealing with too much tension. We actually need to do, like a reverse Kegel where you're like actually learning more about how to release and to lengthen and to get more mobility in the pelvic floor and full range of motion in the pelvic floor. So yeah, just the blanket advice of like, well, keep up your Kegels. It's so unfortunate, but actually it could be causing, especially talking about prolapse, someone who is guarded, tight, and tense can have prolapse symptoms. Someone who is living in a very lengthened, weak, elongated position with their muscles can also be dealing with prolapse. So it's not actually we need to do Kegels or to only strengthen the pelvic floor to manage prolapse or leakage or some of these other pelvic floor dysfunctions. It's really about getting optimal full range of motion in the pelvic floor and then being able to strengthen appropriately. So yeah, Kegels can do more harm sometimes, especially if you are dealing with certain tendencies of pain with intimacy, pelvic pain, chronic tension, you have a high stress, or things like that. We would definitely want you to stay away from Kegels and get your body more in a, relaxed state if we could.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome and really good information. How can women prepare for postpartum recovery to reverse or prevent leakage, pain, or prolapse? And I'd love if we could start with that leakage because I know that is just top of the list for a lot of moms, and sometimes it doesn't go away. But how do women prepare for that postpartum recovery? My Essential Birth Black Friday deals are live. Right now, you can grab the My Essential Birth course and get our exclusive birth affirmation cards download, belly mapping guide, and bonus meditation track, only available through this offer. And you can bundle and save by adding the postpartum course, plus get 2 more bonuses, which is our postpartum affirmation audio track and belly binding tutorial for you and your birth partner. Head to myessentialbirth.com and get started today.
Yes, absolutely. Starting in pregnancy. So if you are pregnant right now, start in pregnancy, right? And you don't even have to have leakage in pregnancy, right? If you're having leakage in pregnancy, then it is a higher statistics that you will also have leakage in postpartum. Now, moms that leak consistently beyond 12 weeks postpartum, if there's no intervention, studies have shown that they're still leaking at 5 years postpartum. So this is not actually something that just goes away on its own. We actually have to intervene and do correction to the nervous system, to the musculoskeletal system, education on bracing strategies and, the core components of that as well, and managing pressure appropriately. These are all things that need to be taught to pregnant and postpartum moms. So tactically, I would say start in pregnancy. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, too far gone, girlfriend, like I'm already postpartum, I'm still peeing my pants, then I would just say get support now, right? We first, with all of our clients, we take them through our 4-phase pelvic floor restore method, but all of our clients are becoming extremely spatially and connected to their pelvic floor, right? Somatically, spatially, and mind-body connected to their pelvic floor, even to the extent of where's the urethra? Where's the rectum? How do I contract from the front to the back, from the side to the side? Okay, now how do I release fully and feel that letdown of the pelvic floor as well? And so what the number one thing that you can do is really get integrated and start to mind-body map where that area is again. You wouldn't believe how many people have had babies, multiple babies, even vaginally, that is like, I didn't even know what the pelvic floor was. I still don't even know how to connect to my pelvic floor or where it's even located or what its purpose and job is. So in my opinion, the first step is really just educating yourself, getting your body registered again to be connected to that region, especially if we're talking about leakage. This is more, the front part of the pelvic floor that we're focusing on, but it can also be driven from tension in other parts of the pelvic floor. So really the first step is spatially, somatically connecting to your pelvic floor and doing this individualized with somebody and kind of walking through this experience.
Can I clarify, just when you're talking about leakage and particularly after 12 weeks, is that like leakage without coughing and sneezing, like just leakage on its own, or are you including coughing and sneezing with that?
I would include coughing and sneezing with that, right? So any leakage, any unwanted leakage. So one of the functions of the pelvic floor is sphincteric, right? That's what it's called, sphincteric, because around the urethra and the anus, there's little circular muscles called sphincteric muscles. And these muscles stay constantly constricted so that we don't have bladder or bowel movements when we don't want to. So we have better control over those. So dysfunction of the pelvic floor is unwanted bladder or bowel leakage. So it is actually a dysfunction of the pelvic floor to have any form of leakage in the at all in general, whether you're not pregnant, postpartum, etc. Now, there are some people who can 100% reverse and eliminate this completely. And there are some people where only with an extreme cough or an extreme sneeze have a little bit of that leakage. So there's varying degrees of this. But really, any leakage beyond that 12 weeks postpartum, if there is no intervention that is done with a professional and a guided plan that's customized to them, they will still experience the same leakage post 5 years as well.
Wow. Okay. What is the biggest myth in pelvic floor rehab postpartum?
Ooh, this is a good one. Honestly, the biggest myth is that, yeah, you need to do Kegels to strengthen your pelvic floor. I would say that that's a hot topic. I also think that a big myth is that our pelvic floor is weak, and that's why we're experiencing, pain or leakage or prolapse. And oftentimes we find the opposite. We find that the pelvic floor just isn't optimally functioning because it doesn't have full range of motion. Right. So if you kind of think about your bicep muscle, because it's easy to register and to think about, and we can visually see that muscle. If you're constantly living in a constricted space where, your hand is up near your shoulder, that muscle is constantly shortened. Well, how are you going to pick up the groceries? How are you going to pick up your kid? If that muscle is fixated and it's living in that shortened position, then it's not able to fully function and operate that you need that arm and that hand and that wrist and that elbow to be able to move. So if we have a pelvic floor that is living in a too short or too tense position, then it's going to start causing, chaos with the hips and the back and the pelvic, the core. The same exact thing for the opposite, right? If you're so loosey-goosey down there and you do have so much elongation and there isn't any support, we're also going to be seeing some issues. So I really think the biggest myth a lot of people think is, I just need to strengthen my pelvic floor. And it's like, yeah, strength is important, but also optimal full range of motion and function of the pelvic floor is what comes before building up strength in the muscle tissue.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I am curious, and I know others are going to want to know as well. One, since your course is online or the way that you handle things is online, how does that work for women who are having some of these issues? Is it just a matter of exercises? Are they talking with somebody? What does that look like for them? And then I will come back to my second question after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, when we went 100% online, it was during the times of COVID. And even myself as an in-person provider was like, can I really get results with clients online? And when we first started, I was even skeptical myself. So I totally can relate and validate any other provider out there that's listening to this or any other professional in the birth industry or even a mom, right? Is like a little skeptical that can we really get the same results online? Honestly, the more clients that we worked with online, what we found, and myself and our team of coaches, what we found was moms were getting incredible results and honestly faster than in person. And this is our personal experience because of it reduced barriers, right? So the reason that we were able to get such incredible results and even quicker is because we were more adherent to the plan. There wasn't barriers to childcare or traveling to and from appointments. There wasn't missed appointments with lack of progression. There wasn't the constant back and forth of being stressed even when you go to an appointment, having to also distract your children and feed them goldfish and get the iPad and you're not even fully present in that session anyways. And so what we found is our clients were happier, they were way less stressed, and they were way more engaged, right? And so if we have a mom that is needing to heal, what do we need her to be? We need her to be less stressed. We can't have her in a stressed out state if she's trying to heal. We need her to be in a good mental, emotional space too, so our clients are happier online. And we need them to be adherent to the program. So with the ability to do it virtually, we found way more adherence, way more consistency, because they weren't relying on that one in-person session that they went to weekly or every 2 weeks to do their exercises so somebody could watch them. We were really asking moms to take ownership and radical responsibility in their healing. And we looked at them more as, our relationship was more continuous. It was more of a continuous model of support where they could have access to us 24/7 in a chat channel. And we would hop on video calls with them all throughout our virtual programs as well. So they still got to build a really deep relationship with us. And we could talk about way more things holistically than maybe the insurance provider would allow us to do because we are meeting moms more in this rehab coaching space. So we're talking about sleep, we're talking about stress, we're talking about mindset and healing, we're talking about nutrition. If moms are not eating well and eating enough protein is the building block for muscle gain and strength. So we need our moms to be able to be treated holistically and to be able to work holistically with us. And through that, we've just seen such incredible results. Moms feeling so supported, so well connected, in addition to having an entire group and a community of sisterhood, of motherhood online, in addition to having weekly group calls and access to course modules. And so the learning and the continuous support was actually what I feel like has gotten us the best results. And now that we're past COVID times, a lot more research is coming out. And they're finding no difference in virtual telehealth, pelvic floor rehab, and in person at 12 weeks. And we're still seeing reduction in leakage. We're still seeing reduction in prolapse symptoms, pain with intimacy. We're still seeing reduction in all of those things. The literature is now telling us that whether moms are supported virtually or whether they supported in person, they're still getting great outcomes. And another study showed 92% of moms were fully satisfied with just virtual support. So it goes to show, I think, that if we meet moms where they're at, we reduce barriers to care and we be able to support them in a different way holistically. Moms are getting better and they're just really satisfied and they're really happy with that progress.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I know, especially postpartum, just moms are so busy and so overwhelmed. And if you're also dealing with those kinds of things, what a benefit to be able to do it at home and have people that you can reach out to and ask for help at home. So I think what you're doing is awesome. And I think it's huge for our community for sure, which kind of led into my second question. And I know moms will be curious about that too. How soon do you see results on these things?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we tend to find that honestly, about 4 to 12 weeks in, we see about 60 to 80% of symptom reduction. At 16 weeks in, we're seeing near full resolution of leakage, of heaviness, of pain. Now, this is varying, right? But that's what our statistics are showing us, because we track our results as well, is it's pretty significant, the progress that you can make in as little as 4 to 16 weeks online, especially even if moms are dealing with this for 2 years. It's like you really just need the right education, the right plan, and need to be adherent and consistent to that. You need to have the right mindset for healing and the support, and you can absolutely make significant progress and changes in as little as 4 months.
That's awesome. Well, thank you today. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for all that you do. I want to take a moment before we jump into kind of our extra questions. I'll just keep you for a couple more minutes. I want you to be able to tell everybody where they can find you. So all your social media, website, all that stuff. And for those who are listening, this will all be in the show notes and the email for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can definitely find me on Instagram at your postpartum PT. If you DM us Core Guide, you can get a free 5-page core guide, just completely free, on us to help support you and really understand what your pelvic floor and your core is and how that system and that complex works together. And if you're wanting to work with us one-on-one, then you can just click the link in bio and schedule a free inquiry call with us. And we're happy to chat with you that way as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.